Welcome back. You're watching Political Exchange, where we continue our discussion on developments in Kenya post the Nairobi siege. Ebrahim, let's pick up with you. Uhuru Kenyatta, Kenya's president, needs to be taken seriously by the international community in the war on terror. The dilemma, of course, is that he is indicted for war crimes in front of the ICC. When President Barack Obama was here earlier, he couldn't go to Kenya because of that reality. How does what happened in Nairobi change that dynamic? And more importantly, are countries going to forego, like the South African President Jacob Zuma seems to suggest, the concerns and issues raised at the International Criminal Court as they face what many may suggest is a bigger and larger crisis? Just generally speaking, many in the African Union and many African states have already resolved, to not in any way inhibit or, impede their communications and their relations with Uhuru Kenyatta. We've already just been seeing, the call for Africa to disassociate itself with the ICC. And regarding specifically, and this, as Ali said, would be probably the best opportunity for Uhuru Kenyatta to... It'll give him a soft landing.
Soft landing. I mean, we've seen just with the war on terror, we've seen, the Bush administration rendition members of, terrorist elements or so-called terrorist elements to countries such as Syria, where, the American regime had a very bad relations or very unmutable relations with the Assad regime, and it shows that the global war on terror usually trumps these what states would call these minor concerns.
Mm-hmm. Ali, the ability of Uhuru Kenyatta to appeal to global sentiment against terrorism, against what happened in Nairobi, is it enough to tilt the scales in his favor, considering that there is already a growing sentiment that the ICC is inordinately concerned with African states and in many instances allow other countries to get off the hook?
Yes, I think obviously President Kenyatta has encouraged the African Union. There is this very, very broad-based sense that the ICC is really, I think Prime Minister Haile Mariam called it race hunting, which was a very powerful phrase to use. But I think, and I saw that today President Kenyatta, or yesterday, wrote an opinion piece in the Wall Street Journal. I think you're going to see a very rapid rapprochement. And if you look over the last 30 years, counterterrorism trumps simply everything.
Absolutely.
On top of that, I think this is an opportunity for the US to reinsert itself into East Africa, where we've got this oil and gas bonanza. And I think the US wants to maintain some kind of gatekeeper status over those assets, which run from Mozambique to Somalia. And that brings into play a desire to staunch the Chinese advance, especially on this side of the continent. Mm-hmm. And I think Kenyatta will play into that as well.
Mm-hmm. You've put your finger right on top of it, isn't it? It's the convergence of both political and economic interests. And of course, America, as we know, moves when it considers its own interests to be at stake. And of course, oil and gas are the things that most countries chase, particularly the largest economy, in the globe. Take us through, Ali, what you think that rapprochement will be like. Will we see feelers being put out from Washington to Nairobi? At what level do you think is this kind of interaction going to be encouraged? Because even if it's just for form's sake at this stage, it would be rather inappropriate for President Obama and President Kenyatta to be talking to each other, isn't it?
I think, the European Union representative to Africa said that counterterrorism is an essential issue. So already we've had a redefinition of the essential term. They've given the green light for this discussion to go on. If you look at the response since Westgate, who has been assisting Kenya from a military point of view? It's been the US, it's been the UK, it's been the European Union. who conducted that aborted, admittedly, attack in Mogadishu just a couple of days ago. It was the US Navy SEALs. So that engagement about which you're asking is already happening, and I suspect the intensity of that engagement will only increase. And I think that's where the rapprochement is going to come from. Of course, the ICC is a judicial court. It has its own process. But I think it's going to be more and more difficult for the ICC to force President Kenyatta at this time, when Kenya has suffered a terrorist attack, to appear in person for days on end at The Hague. That, frankly, is increasingly looking like a non-starter. And from that point on, I think the case against him erodes during his time in office. The case against his deputy presents a different risk, because I think that's not going to go away, and that's going to create a domestic risk dynamic for the president.
Let's shift the focus a little bit, Ebrahim. The phenomena of Al-Shabaab in Kenya, the local derivatives thereof, take us through, the operations of groups such as this. What is the political agenda? What is the political message? And more importantly, what is the organizational form that structures and movements such as Al-Shabaab, have in places like Kenya?
Ali was previously talking about, the Al-Hajj movement, which is basically an offshoot, of Al-Shabaab, in a way, which runs and operates in Kenya. It seems, and from many intelligence reports, it seems to have a very good organizational capacity, and it's able to very easily, as a result of corruption and bribery, easily transport, Kenyans who are sympathetic towards the cause of Al-Shabaab to Somalia. And this, they're mainly sympathetic for the reasons that these people, or many in Kenyan society specifically, many Kenyan Muslims feel disenfranchised in general with the Kenyan government, and some do empathize with the fact that Kenya has, or sympathize with Al-Shabaab because of the fact that Kenya has sent in between 4,000 and 5,000 troops into Somalia, and the port of Kismayo, which was previously controlled by Al-Shabaab, a key reason in that port being changing hands was the presence of Kenyan troops.
Ali, the extent to which the Somali question and the fact that Kenya is actively pursuing Al-Shabaab in Somalia, is that part of the kind of political discourse within Kenyan society? Are Kenyans discussing this matter? And if so, what are they saying? Are they happy with Kenyan troops being in Somalia? Or is it possible that there would be a push to get troops back because Kenyans are feeling the heat of groups such as Al-Shabaab and local derivatives of that?
I absolutely agree. I think Westgate was the catalyst for this conversation to happen in Kenyan society. For a long time, I think a lot of people had been insulated because the war was being waged over our border. The odd attack was happening in places which were not central to the Kenyan polity. So I think definitely Westgate has been a catalyst for this conversation. At the same time, it's also been a rallying. It has had a rallying effect. People have rallied behind the president. The hashtag We Are One best captures the mood of the country.
Yes.
And I think the country, whilst understanding that this is blowback, appreciates the fact that there is a medium-term plan in hand, and that is to bring this border, this neighbor under control. And I think that people are prepared to pay a price for now to achieve that. Whether they'll be prepared to pay another price is a different question.
Ebrahim, the military offensive against Al-Shabaab, the battle for control of Kismayo was very critical, and of course taking that out of Al-Shabaab's control was both a victory in real terms, where you win on the ground, but also psychologically it was a massive victory. But is there or is the answer purely a military one? Ought there not to be a multi-pronged strategy? Ought the phenomena of Al-Shabaab not to be dealt with politically as well?
Yes, and that's a key concern. You know, as a result of Westgate, we would see, a more emphasis being placed on the military aspect rather than, politically including Al-Shabaab. As one of the Somali defense ministers who previously served under the 2005 to 2009 transitional government says that the solution is not a military solution. You need to appeal to, the many disillusioned youth that are part of the Al-Shabaab organization. Al-Shabaab still maintains between 5,000 and 7,000 troops within Somalia, and militarily the AU, the MSM force, even though it is 17,000 strong, would not be able to fully disarm them, and thus the main key important factor in this is the new deal that was signed on the 17th of September between the international community and the current Somali government, which seeks to provide economic aid and through economic development tease these Al-Shabaab members back into the general Somali fold. And the other initiative, which was undertaken by the Somali Religious Society, who passed a fatwa on just early September declaring the group's activities un-Islamic, and in a way taking away one of its main credentials, or one of its main points.
Ali, final question to you. Of course, military solutions are not going to give us long-term and sustainable peace. We need economic development. We need young people to have a sense of buy-in into their futures, both in Somalia and in Kenya. If you look at the economic plan of the Kenyan government, if you look at the kind of economic, nuts and bolts that they're putting on the table, do they understand that that is the key, and is there enough buy-in from the private sector that is the long-term solution to dealing with groups such as Al-Shabaab, who often try to appeal to disaffected young people?
I think that the pace of economic growth has got to be so fast in order to uplift enough people to reduce this risk down to a negligible point. And I'm not sure that's going to happen quickly enough. I think, we're going to have a new normal of asymmetric warfare like we've seen. And the question is, how do we go protecting ourselves against this situation? I think the government understands the seriousness of the issue, but here in Kenya, we're an open society. We're not like Addis, we're not like Kigali, and there is a price to pay for that openness. It's a thriving society, but at the same time, it's extremely open, and in that sense, it's unusual. I don't know how that's going to change, and I don't know how the government is going to accelerate the growth fast enough to create the trickle down that's required. The future is bright, but it just might not be quick enough.
Gentlemen, that is where we have to leave it. Thanks so much to our guest, Aly-Khan Satchu, CEO of Rich Management, and of course in Johannesburg, Ebrahim Deen, researcher at the Afro Middle Institute. That's all from me, Karima Brown.